everyone. Today I want to talk about fluidity versus rigidity. What do I mean by that? Being fluid versus being rigid. Letting things flow in a more fluid way versus being so rigid. So I was watching a podcaster and he was talking about, letting life flow in a fluid way as opposed to being so rigid. And he was right. I grew up in a generation, I'm an 80s and 90s kid. And so I grew up in a generation where it was so rigid. You had to be the best. You had to look the best, dress the best, perform the best at school, perform the best on your job. You're sick, come to work, because that's proven to the so-called powers that be, your so-called bosses, that you are dedicated to the job. Even if you're half dead, you can't stand, you can't function, you come to work. That shows that you're being productive. So you I guess, live your life in a way that's more rigid as opposed to being fluid. So currently I started working with two people who are what you would consider Gen Zers. And so they say how Gen Zers are slackers, they're lazy, they lack motivation. I totally disagree. These young people conduct their lives in a fluid way. If they're sick, they stay home. If they come to work and they get sick, they go home. They're not focused on so-called authority, they're focused on themselves. They let things go in a more fluid way. Like if you're in a classroom with children, the teacher who was the most strict and the most rigid was praised by administration, as opposed to a teacher who's more fluid, who allows the children's personalities to come through and shine, as opposed to molding them into who we think they should be, to who society tells us that they should be. Good robots, basically. So I'm learning to let life flow in a more fluid way, and it's not easy. Being an educator, I was taught, I see these kids doing a certain thing, and I was taught, if administration walks in and your kids are not doing exactly what they want them to do in the way that they want them to do it, then it would look bad on you. Now I recognize that everyone is an individual. They're taught differently, they're genetically different, they're culturally different. So if I want my life to flow in a more fluid way, I have to let these children allow people's lives to flow in a more fluid way. Fluidity versus rigidity. It'll change your life if you allow your life to just flow, as opposed to trying to micromanage and control every little aspect of your life. Less stress. You know what I'm saying? I read just peaceful vibes. It's awesome. I always put these videos up when I learn something new, and that's something that I've learned. I'm going to let my life flow in a more fluid way as opposed to being rigid. Wholeness and love to you all.